Do you know, Pat Senich, that the last time you and I chatted on the air was about 25 years ago? Can you imagine that?
That long.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Which all goes to prove that time flies when you're having fun or you owe money. And I'm not having fun. Pat is a handwriting expert. To put it in the classical sense, she is a graphologist. No, she is a graphoanalyst. And the reason I said graphologist, Pat, is because there's a difference, isn't there?
Yes, there is, Jim.
Tell me quickly, what is it? Graphologist is a term that most anyone uses, but it's not accurate.
Graphology is a generic term that is used to cover all of the handwriting studies that are made. The difference between graphoanalysis and graphology is simply that graphoanalysis is a scientifically based study of the handwriting that is analyzed in any given situation. They are confused at times, and one of the problems that besets the graphologist is that they cannot find a scale by which to rate all of the separate handwriting elements in order to assign a specific meaning to any given stroke in the handwriting.
So, as you said, graphoanalysts, you take courses. Are you degreed?
We have been certified after an intensive study of 18 months through Chicago. Each and every student, fortunately, has one person who does a one-on-one study with us, and every question that you ever have is answered. They do have examinations once a week that we mail back to Chicago, and there are courses on the premises at the International Graphoanalysis Society in Chicago. I found that it was very helpful because in a classroom situation we would not have the opportunity to advance in our studies unless someone is there on a one-to-one basis. I have taught classes in handwriting analysis all over the state of Connecticut, and I find even in that particular situation that the smaller the class, the better it is. I give more individual attention also.
Pat, in handwriting analysis, you have taken 18 months worth of courses. You are an expert in your field, but is in the field of handwriting analysis, is it very much like, let's say, there are professional baseball players, but there are some professional baseball players who are making $4.5 million a year, and there are some that are making $1 million a year, which I think I'm trying to say in a roundabout fashion, both these people are professionals. Obviously, one is better than the other for whatever that degree of talent may be. In your business, in your craft, if you will, are there other things? Is there a talent involved? Is there a feeling involved? For example, if I gave a handwritten note to you, and I gave the same handwritten note to another graphoanalyst, would the results be the same?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It may be written with a few words that are a little different, but that's just a matter of semantics, because the analysis should prove to be identical in nature. The tools, the procedure that is used is done in exactly the same way for every one of the graphoanalysts.
So we are talking here about a science. When I mentioned the fact yesterday that you were going to be our guest, this is not like, and I suppose you have to live with this on a daily basis, this is not like reading tarot cards, it's not like reading palms, it's not like looking into a crystal ball, or fondling crystal, if you will. This is a science.
It definitely is.
Now, to the point where, if I understand it correctly, and I think I do, there are major corporations around the world that have on their staff at least one graphoanalyst.
That's true.
Who goes over applications for employment. Is that correct?
That is correct. As a matter of fact, one of the areas that I find most helpful is personnel screening. I was involved in that in a company that I worked for until recently. There are several people who, unfortunately, in the personnel department cannot use graphoanalysis totally, but it is one of the tools that is used for hiring purposes. And it helps both the employer and the employee. If it's a misfit and it's not a good situation for either one of them, you've saved a lot of money for the company and a lot of time for both people.
Must the person who submitted an application be informed of the fact that their handwriting is going to be analyzed? Is that a law or anything?
That has been a question. We have had many conversations during our chapter meetings. Their answer to that is that most of the time, if you apply for a job, you actually don't know the tools, the psychological tools that are being used. There are screening tests of all kinds. So in that light, we do use it in a very positive way. We're just trying to determine whether or not this particular individual is suited for that position. And again, I repeat, it's just one of the several tools that is used. We wouldn't base it just on...
So what you're saying is that if someone employed you and said, Pat, we want you to analyze this handwriting, here's what our company is all about. These are the kinds of people we're looking for. This is the kind of temperament we're looking for. This is a very stressful position. And you're given the ground rules, if you will. So you can then work from what the company is looking for in terms as to whether or not this prospective employee is going to be suited for this company?
Exactly. Their traits and characteristics that mesh with the position or the requirements of the job are easily discerned from their handwriting. And, for instance, as an example, if you needed someone to do secretarial work that does not provide variety, and the individual whose sample I'm looking at has very large lower loops, it's going to be very difficult for that individual to sit at a desk all day. That type of person needs variety, activity, and involvement in other activities besides just sitting and typing.
Before I take a break, allow me to ask you, historically, how accurate is graphoanalysis?
We are unfortunately unable to say that it's anything more than 98% accurate, as in any given science. Any physician can say the same thing. Any psychological tool is based on the findings that you have available. I have never, in my experience in the last 29 years, seen any negative results from it. I think you have to take it on an individual basis. And each person that I do an analysis for, I follow up. The questions are always whether or not they found it to be true, if they found fault with it, if there's anything that they disagreed with. And so far, I have never had that experience. Occasionally, there are questions involved that I can straighten out between that individual and myself.
I'll take a break. My special newsmaker is Pat Senich. She is a handwriting expert, a graphoanalyst, and I'll be back with Pat after these words. My newsmaker is Pat Senich. She is a graphoanalyst. My phone number is 597-1240 if you have any questions of Pat and her science. Pat, when you analyze someone's handwriting, does it take you a period of time, or can you look at something pretty quickly and at least give a fairly accurate reading of what you see?
I can look at a handwriting sample and very quickly summarize it. However, the standard procedure in preparing an analysis is anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours for a brief profile analysis. Anything beyond that, for instance, a general graphoanalysis or a compatibility report, would definitely take several hours.
Take a look at that, if you will. I'm asking you for a snap judgment, if you possibly can, which may be somewhat unfair, but I'm looking for a general perception. I've just handed Pat a sample of handwriting, and what she's doing is... Can you comment on this while you're looking at it, by the way?
Well, from the size of the writing in this particular sample, and this, I believe, is the actual sample. It has not been enlarged or reduced in size.
No, I enlarged it.
You enlarged it?
Yeah, I enlarged it. I mean, but obviously the writing is still the same.
Right.
Okay.
The reason I ask that is because the size of writing makes a great deal of difference. Small writing, which is usually 1/18 of an inch in size, indicates someone who can focus very well, who concentrates extremely.
There's the original before I enlarged it.
Okay. Yeah, it does show that it's very small writing, and this individual writer has the ability to focus in and close out any body or anything that's disturbing them. For instance, they could be in a room full of noise and not really pay attention, not even notice the noise around them. Beyond that, it appears to be the type of slant which indicates their reaction or their response to a given situation, that of a very composed and very cool, very calm person. Now that again takes a little bit of time. We use a gauge that analyzes the slant of the writing, and very often its appearance outwardly may look like it's very calm and very cool. However, when you put this gauge down on the writing and you analyze 100 upstrokes, something different may appear. From what I can see here, the few things that stand out are a very slight difficulty in accepting personal criticism. In other words, that person may have been severely criticized as a youngster and has difficulty in working that out. They need to have a little bit more self-esteem. There are times when they're very confident and they feel they can stand on their own 2 feet. However, there are moments of the inability to feel that they've accomplished anything, and a little bit of low self-esteem. They also have a desire for culture, which means that they have the ability to either write poetry, play a musical instrument, and they love to be able to learn some of the finer things in life. The organizational ability does not seem apparent. That usually appears in the strokes that make up the letter F. And if they're not balanced in the upper and lower regions, then that person is not one to be very organized. They also are able to jump right into any given subject, taking no time to waste. And that is also typical of small writing. They don't waste any time.
Is that a person that you would say, could you tell by analyzing this handwriting, if this person is under duress while it's written? Do you see any trouble in terms of what this handwriting shows you?
This particular sample does not necessarily show any signs of real trouble. However, in all fairness to the individual, it is always best in any question, document, examination of any kind to have what they consider the known writing. And that is not always possible to acquire. However, that would show the analyst what the differences are from their basic normal writing to the writing of this particular sample.
You just analyzed the suicide note of Vince Foster.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
And based on what you're telling me, and this is why I'm saying the supposed suicide note of Vince Foster, based on what you're telling me, and granted, you don't have enough time to totally analyze this thing, but just a very, very quick analysis here. You're telling me that it doesn't look as though the person that wrote this is under duress.
Not really.
It doesn't look as though the person was going through a traumatic situation. Yet, this is given to the American public to look at. And we are being told that that's the torn up, without the signature, by the way, the torn up suicide note that was found in Vince Foster's briefcase.
I find that difficult to believe for 2 very good reasons. Many years ago, there were samples of handwriting of some of the known poets and artists who, in fact, did end up taking their own lives. And as a matter of fact, the slant of their writing would necessarily have to be at least downhill to some degree. And that does show depression. However, you need to understand that depression sometimes occurs and it's reversible. But when it becomes very serious and severe, it would have to have shown up, I would think, in any given sample of this nature if someone were attempting suicide.
That's why I asked you.
So there's a question in your part of it.
Well, yes, there is a question, because 30% of the American people, last survey I read, believe that Vince Foster did not kill himself. There are 30% of we conspirators out there who believe that he was bumped off. Now, am I pointing my finger directly to the White House when I say that? No, not directly. But this is why I was rather interested in what you would have to say about this note. Which, by the way, because I happen to, I know that handwriting done in the fashion you do it as a graphoanalyst is pretty darn accurate, as you had indicated yourself, 98%. So I find it fascinating that you look at this note and you're saying this doesn't look like something that was written by someone who was going to put a .38 caliber in their mouth and pull the trigger.
You must have seen the surprised look on my face when you said that this was someone who had taken his own life, because it certainly, there are a lot of factors that are involved, and of course, we can't make that judgment. However, the wonderful part about graphoanalysis is that I take this piece of paper with this writing that I believe is known writing and analyze it, devoid of any other possibilities and anyone's opinion. And again, as I say, you're looking at the sample and that's what I see. Of course, if I spent a few hours more, I'm going to come up with a few more things, that a lot more, as a matter of fact. Certainly not anything that would indicate someone that wanted to take his life.
Pat, allow me to ask you, you said that the person who wrote it was artistically bent, or of an artistic bent. You had indicated that this was the kind of person who could concentrate to the point where they could block all extraneous things out, which, based on the little bit I know about Vince Foster, is true. I guess he was very competent at what he did. But you could tell, just by this very, very snap analysis of his handwriting, that it wasn't the handwriting of a depressed person.
No, not at all.
Okay. Allow me to take a break. I'll be back. My newsmaker is Pat Senich. She is a graphoanalyst, a handwriting expert. And if you have any questions of Pat, please feel free to call me at 597-1240. Back after these words. Sullivan back. Pat Senich is my guest, graphoanalyst, handwriting expert. You know, am I wrong, Pat, in suggesting that in terms of your profession, that you have to be a little frustrated in the respect that most people, have no idea what graphoanalysis is and the significance of a person's handwriting?
Yes, Jim, that's a very good question. For years, we really did feel, at least those of us in the Connecticut chapter of graphoanalysts, as if we were the pilgrims, or what you might say are the people who have to spread the good word. Because one statement was made in one of our journals, I remember very clearly, that if people knew of the value of handwriting, there would never be enough analysts to go around. Unfortunately, there are a lot more people that don't know enough about it. In the recent years, a lot of articles have been written, and there are, as you said before, very large corporations and companies that respect it highly and use it very widely. I think the reason is that it's not something that we want to just hand out freely, and we do get confused with the palm readers and the graphologists.
I was just going to ask you that. That must be the frustrating part.
It is. Someone said to me once, "Oh, do you read palms?" And I thought, "Oh, no, not at all. I use my hands and my palms to write, but that's as far as it goes." Now, handwriting, strangely enough, actually dates back to antiquity. It's back in the 1600s that it was first founded by a man named Milton Bunker. He was not satisfied with the books that he wrote or read on graphology, and he wanted proof. So therefore, he set out to make a study of thousands of handwriting samples, and they then, in 1929, began the International Graphoanalysis Society. Now, at this point in time, there are over 50,000 members, and those members consist of doctors, lawyers, teachers by and large, nurses, homemakers, secretaries, people from all walks of life. And when you attend a meeting in Chicago, when we have, in July, they have a Congress that is absolutely phenomenal. You're on the elevator with people that are from all parts of the world, and they are all very well educated people. They're intelligent people. They understand that this is not a game. This is for real.
I want to get back to that. If you'd put those headsets on for me, Pat,
Sure.
I hate to have you mess up your hair, but we have a call, and I want you to be able to hear the question. Hello, Bill, you're on with Pat Senich.
Thank you. Hi, Pat.
Hi.
I'm interested in finding out, children, at what age can you analyze their handwriting, and what information can you get from it?
Bill, that's a good question. You can analyze a child's handwriting as early as 9 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And I have raised 4 children with the help of Graphoanalyst because each and every one of these 4 are very different. The understanding that you have from the knowledge of their handwriting helps tremendously in raising them and into understanding them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Now, why is it not accepted? Is that why we don't use it more like in our school systems?
Many of the school systems have actually been using it to a certain degree. When I was working in St. Thomas Junior High School in Southington, we were very much a part of, or I should say the principal was very much a part of the handwriting analysis classes. Every teacher that entered the school had to take a class, so they understood it better, and we did use it to a certain degree. However, it's very difficult for the schedules that the teachers have on to be able to get involved in it too deeply.
That definitely answers my question.
Wait a minute, before you go away, you see that handwriting that's in front of you?
Mm-hmm.
That's the gentleman who's calling right now.
Ah.
You want to give him a snap analysis on that, if you possibly can? Other than the fact that he's male.
Well, you know that you cannot tell from handwriting sample whether it's male or female. Age makes no difference, except that in a child's writing, of course, there's going to be a great deal of difference at the age of 9 as far as what you see in a handwriting sample then and when you're in your 20s or 30s.
Mm-hmm.
This very brief sample, and by the way, if this is true, happy anniversary on Sunday.
It is, thank you very much.
It does show someone who is, for the most part, responsive and of a very generous nature, and yet at the same time able to handle not giving of yourself so much that you're totally worn out. Because there are times that you really, really enjoy being alone, working alone, and going off by yourself. That doesn't mean that you don't like people. You like variety and you like change. And it also typifies a thinking process that is very versatile, one that can analyze and weigh situations, both pros and cons, and also that you can build fact on fact, and very often just thinking very quickly, and your mind will run very fast. And also there's a lot of organizational ability there too. Does that sound like you?
Yeah, it does. The organizational part I'm not so sure about, but everything else is you're right on the money.
Obviously, this is not the man I thought it was either.
You're working on it, Bill. There's some of it there.
Pat, it was nice talking to you.
Thanks
You
for your
too.
call.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Bill.
it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pat, you know, the thing that I know sticks in your craw, I want to get back to something you were talking about a little earlier. I have, as probably you may have, too, over the years, been to parties. A lot of time, there are many times where someone wants to do something a little unusual for their guests, and I've been to parties where they've had graphologists who go around and say, give me a sample of your handwriting, and they give you a quick analysis of what you are and things of that nature. Does that bug you a little bit?
It bothers me. It really does bother me a great deal. Unfortunately, it puts graphoanalysis in the wrong light. The only way that you can handle that, and I have really been blessed with not having too many questions like that at any kind of social function, but I look at it like it's my chance to give them the truth. And if they are really interested in having their handwriting analyzed, I would give them maybe 1 or 2 positive traits that I would give at any given lecture. And then if they're interested, I hand them my card, excuse me. And from there, if they're really very curious and interested, I should say, in having a profile analysis done, I let them know that that's the possibility.
That's what you do for a living?
That's right.
Okay.
I just feel that I want to be able to clarify in their mind that it's not a game, it's not a parlor game. It can be fun. It can be a great deal of fun. We've had enormous times of fun when we are giving a class, when I instruct a class. But that's on a different basis. When you're at a party, it's just like asking a doctor to...
I was just going to say
advice.
that. Yeah. How about
fair.
this pain in my side, doctor? Or an attorney, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
Have you, in the 29 years you've been doing this, based on your analysis of handwriting, have you changed any lives that you're aware of?
That's a very interesting question. I have heard from several people some years later. It doesn't happen all at once and overnight, and it didn't for me either, because it takes first a total awareness that they now are looking at this analysis and thinking, wow, I guess that there is something that I can improve on. I had a client the other day that said, gee, you didn't say I should improve on anything. I said, well, you've already been working at it for so long that, frankly, there was nothing there that appeared negative, and not that there really is anything negative in a given sample. Actually, I find that there are people who have come back to me and said, I'm so glad that you did my handwriting, because I am now really aware of what my weaknesses were, and I'm working on them. And I can speak for myself, personally. I think that it's a rude awakening, and there are very few little things that perhaps someone else didn't notice, but I did, and I wanted to make that better. You have to be dealing with a person who really cares about growing. It's a tremendous journey. It's a growth, because you're forever walking around with a monkey on your back, so to speak. You know yourself well, and you know every time you write that this is what shows, and there's no way I can deny that, because it's the truth.
Pat, does handwriting, you suggested to the gentleman who called that 9 years of age is the time where you can get a pretty accurate read on what a child of that age is. Over the years, does a person's handwriting change? And if indeed it does, is that indicative of anything?
The handwriting of a student, let's say in third grade, they are now beginning to write cursive. I actually started when my second child was born and followed them fairly closely without being too dominant. And I knew at that point in time, just like any other sample of a child at that age, that they had certain characteristics that would be with them for life. I noticed in my daughter's handwriting a tremendous creativity. She was not one to sit in a classroom. She's not a student, but very bright. So she then entered the creative field, and now she's a professional full-time clown. The other child was very intense and very studious, a great kid in school, and he always was probably above average in his grades. The other two are totally different. The fact that you can look at a handwriting of a child, a baby. I have two grandchildren who, again, indicate totally different personalities. But you have to look at the fact that over a period of 5 to 10 years, there's a great growth period. And from the time they enter first grade until they leave high school, there are going to be changes. The most dramatic changes take place when there's a tremendous trauma, or when there's some kind of an event that takes place in their life that really shows a difference in two samples.
Is there a stage in one's life, an age, roughly, where there is no change whatsoever, let's say from age 30 to death, if you will?
You're right. That's a very good question, too, because the changes that take place occur less often after 30, 40 years of age, because you've pretty well established your lifestyle, your personality. Your changes the dramatic changes in the handwriting show up, of course, when they're very young, because from teenage to adulthood, there are tremendous changes there. However, some people don't. Some of them, frankly, don't grow that much and don't change that much.
Can you indicate from one's handwriting a dark side to that person? For example, I have a book home, a pocket book, which very frankly I put aside because I just didn't understand it. There have been myriad examples of Adolf Hitler's handwriting. As a matter of fact, he's one of these people that are generally used as an example. If someone came to you, an individual, and you said, okay, write out whatever, and they wrote it out, could you tell in that person's handwriting if perhaps you might be reading the handwriting of a murderer or a thief?
That's a pretty heavy load. We're not in the business of labeling.
No.
And, in a sense, that would be. However, what you're saying is that, yes, there are certain personalities that have strong resemblance to more negative side of their personality.
That's a better way of putting it.
But, as you know, every one of us are potential everything. And it's just, again, the way we use these traits, the way we choose to live our lives. There are people who have a great willpower, but that could be an ill will. It could be on the negative side. It depends on the choice you make. However, there are certain people whose samples, like Adolf Hitler's, that do show a lot of negativity, and certainly something that you and I might not have in our writing.
What would be the trait of someone that has some strong negative qualities? Is it the slant of their letters? Is it the way they cross their T's or dot their I's?
More of the T-bars and the I-dots show temper and irritability, and if it's a very heavy writing, they have strong appetites, and if not satisfied, of course, if they choose to do something negative, it's not going to be what you and I might say is good, in a sense.
Also, the size of the writing is indicative of something, is it not? Someone who... what is the difference, for example, of someone who has a small, say, neat handwriting as opposed to one who writes with a flourish? I would hate, like the Dickens, to have you analyze Alexander Hamilton's handwriting, but what does that mean generally?
Generally speaking, the size of the writing indicates the... for instance, the small writing is someone who is very modest and prefers to be quiet, subdued, sometimes withdrawn, not always, depending on other traits. But large writing is someone who is just totally aware of their surroundings and finds it difficult to concentrate or focus, but loves life and just has to be involved in everything. And the usual 75 to 78% of the samples that we have tested are, generally speaking, in a moderate range, where there's pretty much the same size. But you're absolutely right. The size of the writing makes a great deal of difference, and the weight of the writing makes a difference, too.
Can you tell anything specific from a person's signature? I know that when you practice your art, that you ask someone to write out a sentence. I know that. But can you tell anything from a person's signature? There's a personal bent to what I'm going to ask you. Over the past 30 years, say, my signature has changed on at least 3 different occasions. What is that indicative of, if anything?
Signature, you have to bear in mind that is your public image, the marquee. This is the way you want the world to see you. And most of us have started to write our signature before we entered kindergarten or first grade. So this is the past history of traits that are incorporated into your personality, the future of what you would anticipate doing and what you're doing right now. So therefore, in your case, if you've had major life changes and perhaps job changes, dramatic or traumatic situations, it will change. The actual traits and characteristics will never be, they will always remain in your writing, but you'll be able to tell the differences in samples that you gave me, for instance, 5 years ago, and then maybe last year and now. But that signature will change more rapidly than the rest of the writing, because that is you. That is you as the ego and as the person. When we do a sample of handwriting, we really need to have a signature on the page, because very often the signature, say Bill O'Neill's, for instance, was very different. Then you look at the body of writing and you see the real traits and characteristics. But the signature is, again, that's their public image, and that's the way that person presents themselves in public.
What do you feel the future, or in the future, for handwriting analysis? You'd indicated earlier, I asked you this question because it seemed that for a while this had become a very, very big thing, particularly in the terms of large companies hiring people in what were supposed to be significant jobs. Then, I don't know whether it's because I stopped reading about it, but then there seemed to be a lull. Is that pretty much true? Has handwriting analysis been consistent?
Well, as far as I can see,
not the art, of course. I'm talking about as a profession.
As a profession, it has grown. I know that members of our chapter have diminished, and that, excuse me, that just typifies at this point in time, it's more of an economy move. I have held classes in Wethersfield at the Learning Exchange. One class you have more than you can even handle, and then the next year you have very few people. It depends, I think, on the economy. Right now, the importance is still there. We, as graphoanalysts, know and feel that it is definitely growing with importance. I think we've weeded out some of the people who looked at it as being something other than scientific.
Parlor game.
Right, exactly.
So you feel as though this field is going to grow?
Definitely. As a matter of fact, there are more articles written and more information given on it than ever was before. I think, again, it's very expensive to take the course if you go through Chicago, and a lot of people really come to me and say, I want so badly to get it in, but I just can't afford it.
Well, what are you talking about expensive?
The course that I took through Chicago several years ago, at that time, was $350. Right now, it's over $1,000.
Doesn't sound like a lot. I would suggest that the reason that there may be a reluctance to pay the $1,000 is that most people want to do it more as an avocation as opposed to a profession. Is that fairly safe?
Absolutely true, yeah. But you do find that you sift out the real scientists and the real genuine graphoanalysts, and they do keep taking the course, and they will eventually benefit from it.
Can you grow, by the way? Once you've taken the course, which you have, and you are a graduate of, have you grown in terms of your expertise?
Definitely. I have, of course, been raising 4 children and working full-time until recently, so that does keep you away from doing it as often as you'd like. However, there are always hours of the day that you can be working on something like this, and I have always had classes. I've taught classes for the last 25 years on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and periodically have given talks in and around the state of Connecticut, so that there definitely is, it's never been out of my life. If that helps you to understand that it's a choice I make, you don't really ever forget it. You just can't, and it's just a part of your life.
But you get better at it.
Definitely.
The more you do, obviously.
Right, exactly.
So although this thing, handwriting analysis, is a science, there's still the room within the parameters of what the specifically dotted I or crossed T might mean according to the charts or whatever but you can grow in regards to that.
Definitely.